Jake Morrison wiped down the last table in his small diner and looked around with satisfaction. The evening crowd had gone home, leaving Morrison's kitchen quiet and clean. He loved these peaceful moments at the end of each day. The planet New Haven was still new to human settlers, and running a diner on the frontier was not easy work. But Jake enjoyed feeding hungry people and making them smile that he carried the trash bags out to the bins behind his restaurant. The night air was cool and fresh. 2 moons hung in the sky above, casting silver light across the rocky ground. Jake breathed deeply and smiled. He liked this planet. It felt like home. A small sound made him stop. It came from near the waste bins. Jake walked closer and heard it again. It sounded like a whimper, like something small and scared. He set down his bags and peered into the shadows. 3 little creatures huddled together between the bins. They looked up at him with bright, intelligent eyes. Jake had never seen anything like them before. They had scales that shimmered in the moonlight, showing colors of blue, green, and purple. Small wings folded against their backs. They were no bigger than cats, and they looked hungry and cold. Jake knelt down slowly. He did not want to scare them. The creatures watched him but did not run away. One of them made a soft chirping sound. Jake smiled. They reminded him of the stories about dragons he had read as a child, but these were tiny and harmless looking. That he went back inside and grabbed some leftover food from the kitchen. He had some grilled chicken, fresh bread, and a bowl of soup that had not been served. Jake brought it all outside and placed it on the ground near the little creatures. They looked at the food, then at him, then back at the food. The smallest one crept forward first. It sniffed the chicken and took a careful bite. Its eyes went wide. Then it ate faster. The other 2 joined in. Jake watched them eat with a warm feeling in his chest. He had always believed that feeding someone who was hungry was one of the best things a person could do. It did not matter if they were human or some kind of alien creature. Hungry was hungry. When the food was gone, the 3 creatures looked up at him. They made happy chirping sounds. The biggest one bobbed its head, almost like it was saying thank you. Jake laughed softly. He reached out a hand, moving very slowly. The biggest creature sniffed his fingers, then rubbed its scaly head against his palm. It felt warm and smooth. After that night, the 3 creatures came back every evening. Jake started calling them by names. The biggest one, who was brave and bold, he named Pip. The one with the reddish scales who seemed to like spicy food he called Ember. The quiet one with silver blue scales was Whisper. They became part of his routine. Each night after closing, he would prepare special meals for them and sit outside while they ate. Sometimes they brought him little gifts. Shiny stones, strange flowers, once even a piece of metal he could not identify. Jake kept all these treasures in a box in his kitchen. His regular customers started noticing the 3 small dragons around the diner. Most people thought they were cute. A few warned Jake to be careful. Nobody knew much about the wildlife on New Haven yet. But Jake trusted his instincts. These creatures were intelligent and friendly. They understood when he talked to them, even if they could not talk back. He was sure of it. What Jake did not know was that these were not simple animals. Far away, in the dragon territories beyond human space, Governor Valdris Stormwing sat in his council chamber. He listened to reports from his young spies. 3 juveniles from noble families had volunteered for a secret mission. They were to observe the new human settlers and report back. Were humans dangerous? Did they plan to take dragon lands? Could they be trusted? The reports that came back were strange. Instead of military information or political secrets, the reports talked mostly about food. The young dragons described something called pasta with red sauce. They explained the difference between grilled and fried chicken. They wrote long descriptions of a human named Jake who fed them every night and asked nothing in return. Governor Valdris frowned as he read these reports. This was not the information he needed. But it was interesting. Very interesting. Weeks passed, and Jake grew more attached to his 3 little visitors. He learned their personalities and preferences. Pip was adventurous and would try any new food Jake offered. The little dragon loved sweet things most of all. Cakes, pies, candied fruits. Pip would make happy chirping sounds whenever Jake brought out desserts. Ember had different tastes. This dragon with reddish scales enjoyed spicy dishes. Jake started making special hot sauce just for Ember. He would watch, amused, as the little creature ate peppers that would make a human cry. Ember seemed to glow brighter after eating something spicy, scales shimmering with extra warmth. Whisper, the silver blue one, preferred seafood. Jake had to order special shipments of fish and shellfish. It was expensive, but he did not mind. Watching Whisper carefully examine each piece of fish before eating it made Jake smile. The quiet dragon was the most cautious of the three, but also the most affectionate. Whisper would often curl up near Jake's feet while the others explored. Jake began experimenting with new recipes just for them. He tried combining human cooking methods with ingredients he thought they might enjoy. Sometimes he succeeded, creating dishes that made all three dragons chirp with delight. Sometimes he failed, and they would politely push the food away. Jake laughed at these failures and tried again. The dragons continued bringing him gifts. The collection in Jake's kitchen grew. There were colorful stones, unusual flowers that glowed faintly in the dark, and more pieces of strange metal or crystal. Once, Pip brought him a small device that looked like advanced technology. Jake had no idea what it was, but he treasured it because it came from his little friend. His regular customers loved the dragons. People would come to Morrison's kitchen partly for the food, but also hoping to catch a glimpse of the three small creatures. Children especially adored them. Jake allowed the dragons to interact with gentle customers, and they seemed to enjoy the attention. They would pose for pictures and accept gentle pats on their heads, but not everyone was pleased. One evening, a man named Carl stopped Jake as he was preparing the dragon's dinner. Carl was a miner who had lived on New Haven longer than most. He frowned at the three small dragons waiting patiently by the back door. "You should be careful with those things," Carl said. "We do not know what they are or where they came from. They could be dangerous. They could be carrying diseases. Or maybe their parents are looking for them and will not be happy to find them here with humans." Jake appreciated the concern, but he shook his head. "Look at them," he said. "They are intelligent and peaceful. They have never shown any aggression. I think they understand us better than we realize. Besides, if they were lost children, would you not want someone to feed them and keep them safe?" Carl left, still looking worried. But Jake believed in his choice. These creatures had become his friends. More than that, they felt like family. Every night, he looked forward to seeing them. He talked to them while they ate, telling them about his day, about the customers, about his memories of Earth. The dragons listened, their bright eyes focused on him. Sometimes Jake swore they understood every word. In the dragon territories, Governor Valdris continued receiving unusual reports. His three young spies had been on their mission for weeks now. They should have returned with valuable intelligence. Instead, their messages grew longer and more detailed about human food culture. They described something called pizza. They explained the concept of a restaurant where anyone could come and eat. They wrote about a human chef who treated strangers with kindness. The governor called a meeting with his advisors. "What should we make of this?" he asked. "Our spies send us recipes instead of battle plans. They tell us about friendship instead of weapons." One advisor, an old dragon named Kroth, stroked his long beard. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "they are telling us exactly what we need to know. If humans show compassion to creatures they do not know, to beings they owe nothing to, what does that say about their character?" Governor Valdris sat back, thinking. That was an interesting way to look at it. Everything changed on a cold Tuesday morning. Jake arrived at his diner before dawn, as usual, to start preparing for the day. As he unlocked the front door, he heard raised voices in the street. People were gathering around a public screen, watching the news. Jake walked over to see what the trouble was. The news reporter spoke in a serious tone. A human mining company had accidentally damaged an ancient site in dragon territory. The site was sacred to the dragon people. They were demanding an apology and compensation. The human colonial government was refusing, saying it was an honest mistake and no laws had been broken. Jake felt his stomach twist with worry. He had heard stories about the dragons who lived beyond human space. They were powerful and ancient. Nobody wanted a conflict with them. The reporter continued. Dragon Governor Valdris Stormwing himself would be visiting the human settlement to assess the situation. This was a diplomatic crisis. That evening, Jake prepared food for Pip, Ember, and Whisper as always. But they did not come. He waited for an hour, the food growing cold on the plates. He waited another hour. Still nothing. Jake felt a growing sadness. Maybe Carl had been right. Maybe their parents had found them. Or maybe something had frightened them away. He packed up the uneaten food and went back inside, his heart heavy. The next night, the same thing happened. No sign of the three little dragons. Jake tried to tell himself it was for the best. They were wild creatures. They had their own lives. But he missed them terribly. The diner felt emptier without knowing they would be waiting for him after closing. 3 days passed. The diplomatic situation grew worse. Dragon ships appeared in orbit around New Haven. They had not attacked, but their presence made everyone nervous. The colonial government ordered all citizens to stay calm and go about their normal business. But people were scared. Some talked about evacuation. Others wanted to fight. Jake just wanted his 3 small friends to come back. On the 4th day, Jake heard that Governor Valdris would be arriving that afternoon. His procession would pass through the main streets of the settlement. Jake closed his diner early. He stood outside with dozens of other curious and worried citizens. Everyone wanted to see the dragon governor. The procession was impressive. Large dragons in ornate armor marched down the street. Flying dragons circled overhead. And in the center, on a floating platform, stood Governor Valdris Stormwing himself. He was enormous, easily 3 times the size of a human. His scales were deep purple and black, and his eyes glowed with ancient intelligence. He looked powerful and intimidating. As the procession passed Morrison's kitchen, something unexpected happened. 3 smaller dragons broke away from the group. They wore ceremonial armor and official insignias. But Jake recognized them immediately. Pip, Ember, and Whisper. His heart leaped. They were alive and well. But they were also clearly not simple wild animals. They were part of the governor's official delegation. The 3 young dragons rushed toward Jake, chirping excitedly. Security guards, both human and dragon, shouted in alarm. Weapons were raised. But Pip, Ember, and Whisper ignored everything. They surrounded Jake, rubbing against him, making their happy sounds. Jake knelt down, overwhelmed with emotion. "You came back," he whispered. "I missed you so much." Governor Valdris raised a clawed hand, and everyone fell silent. The massive dragon approached Jake slowly. His expression was unreadable. Jake stood up, trying to be brave despite his fear. The governor looked down at him, then at the 3 young dragons who stood protectively close to the human. "You are the one called Jake Morrison?" the governor asked. His voice was deep and powerful. Jake swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir. I run this diner." The governor's eyes narrowed. "And you have been feeding my nephew and the children of my chief advisors for the past several weeks?" Jake felt his face go pale. "Your nephew? These are noble dragons. I had no idea. I thought they were just hungry animals. I am so sorry if I did something wrong." Governor Valdris studied Jake for a long moment. The human stood there, surrounded by 3 excited young dragons, looking worried and confused. The governor had expected many things from this visit to the human colony. He had not expected this. "You did nothing wrong," the governor finally said. "In fact, you may have done something very right. Tell me, human. Did you know who these juveniles were when you first fed them?" Jake shook his head quickly. "No, sir. I just saw 3 small, hungry creatures behind my diner. They looked cold and scared. I gave them food. That is all, and you continued to feed them, even though you gained nothing from it. The governor pressed. Jake looked down at Pip, Ember, and Whisper. They looked back at him with trusting eyes. I gained their friendship, Jake said softly. That was worth everything. Besides, leaving someone hungry when you have food to share is wrong. It does not matter who they are or what they are. The three young dragons began chirping and making excited noises. Governor Valdris listened to them, his expression shifting. After a moment, he turned back to Jake. My nephew tells me you created special recipes for each of them. You learned their preferences and went out of your way to make them happy. Is this true? Jake felt himself blushing. Well, yes. Pip loves sweet things, so I made special desserts. Ember enjoys spicy food, so I learned to make hot sauces. Whisper prefers seafood, so I ordered fresh fish. It was fun figuring out what they liked. I am a chef. Making people happy with food is what I do best. The governor made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. It took Jake a moment to realize the massive dragon was laughing. They were supposed to be spying on your people, the governor said. They were supposed to learn about human military capabilities, political structures, technological advancement. Instead, they sent me reports about pasta and pie. Do you know how frustrating that was? Jake did not know what to say. He glanced at the three young dragons. They had been spies. That explained so much. The gifts they brought were probably stolen technology. But they looked so innocent, so happy to see him again. He could not be angry at them. I am sorry they failed their mission, Jake said carefully. Governor Valdris shook his massive head. They did not fail. They told me exactly what I needed to know. They reported that humans are capable of kindness to strangers. That humans value community and sharing meals. That humans show compassion without expecting rewards. One of my advisors pointed out something important. If your people treat unknown creatures with such care, you are not a threat to us. You are potential friends. Jake felt hope rising in his chest. Does that mean the diplomatic crisis can be resolved? The governor nodded slowly. I came here expecting to find aggressive, dangerous beings. Instead, I found people like you. The damaged sacred site was truly an accident. Your government has been trying to explain this, but I did not believe them. Now I do. Actions speak louder than words. Your actions toward three hungry strangers speak volumes. The crowd of humans who had been watching began to murmur excitedly. The governor raised his voice so everyone could hear. I propose a new approach to human and dragon relations. Instead of viewing each other with suspicion, we should learn from each other. We should share our cultures. And I believe this should start with food. Food brings people together. It creates understanding. That he looked down at Jake again. Human chef Jake Morrison, would you be willing to prepare a feast for the Dragon Leadership Council? Your three young friends here can assist you. Let us see if your food can help create peace between our peoples. Jake's mind raced. A feast for dragon leaders? This was huge. This was terrifying. But he looked at Pip, Ember, and Whisper, and he knew his answer. Yes, he said firmly. I would be honored. Let me show you what human cooking can do. Jake had never worked so hard in his entire life. The feast for the Dragon Leadership Council would happen in 3 days. 3 days to create a menu that could change history. 3 days to prove that food could build bridges between species. He barely slept. But he was not alone. Pip, Ember, and Whisper stayed with him the whole time. The three young dragons explained dragon food traditions to Jake. They told him about ancient recipes their people had been making for thousands of years. Jake listened carefully and took notes. Then he started experimenting. He combined human cooking techniques with dragon ingredients. He used dragon spices in familiar human dishes. He created entirely new recipes that honored both cultures. Morrison's kitchen was transformed. Human volunteers came to help. Dragon craftsmen arrived with special equipment. The small diner became a place where two species worked side by side. There were mistakes and misunderstandings. But there was also laughter and growing friendship. Jake watched it all with wonder. This was bigger than just a meal. This was history being made. On the day of the feast, Jake was nervous. The Dragon Leadership Council arrived at sunset. They were all impressive beings, ancient and powerful. Governor Valdris led them into the expanded dining area. Long tables had been set up, designed to accommodate both humans and dragons. Jake had insisted that both species eat together, not separately. It was important that they share the experience. The meal began with a traditional dragon soup, but Jake had added human herbs that enhanced the flavor in new ways. The council members tasted it cautiously. Then their eyes widened. They looked at each other in surprise. "This is remarkable," one elder dragon said. "I have eaten this soup for 300 years, but never like this." "How did you do it?" Jake explained his process, with Pip, Ember, and Whisper helping to translate some of the more complex ideas. The dragons listened with genuine interest. Course after course came out of the kitchen. Each dish was a fusion of human and dragon culinary arts. There was roasted meat prepared with dragon fire-breathing techniques. There were vegetables grown in human farms and seasoned with ancient dragon recipes. There were desserts that made even the most serious council members smile, but the food was only part of it. As they ate together, humans and dragons began to talk. They shared stories. They laughed at the same jokes. They discovered common ground. The Dragon Council members asked about human culture, human history, human dreams for the future. The humans asked the same questions about dragon society. Barriers began to crumble. At the end of the meal, Governor Valdris stood. He raised a glass of wine and looked around the room. "Tonight, we have shared more than food," he announced. "We have shared understanding." This human chef welcomed 3 hungry strangers without knowing who they were. He showed kindness without expecting reward. That is the kind of neighbor we want. That is the kind of ally we need. He turned to Jake. "We came to your world prepared for conflict. You gave us friendship instead. The Dragon Council has decided. We will form an official alliance with humanity. And we will begin that alliance right here, in Morrison's kitchen. This restaurant will become the embassy for cultural exchange between our peoples." The crowd erupted in cheers. Dragons and humans celebrated together. Jake felt tears running down his face. He had just wanted to feed 3 hungry creatures. He never imagined it would lead to this. The treaty was signed the next day on one of the tables in Morrison's kitchen. The diner was expanded and officially recognized as a place of diplomacy and friendship. Both governments provided funding. Jake continued cooking, but now his restaurant served both species. It was always full of customers, both human and dragon, sharing meals and building understanding. Pip, Ember, and Whisper stayed on as official cultural ambassadors. They worked with Jake every day, learning human cooking and teaching dragon traditions. New Haven became the most important planet in human and dragon relations. All because a chef had been kind to 3 strangers. Years later, Jake would stand in his expanded kitchen, teaching a class of mixed students. Young humans and young dragons learned cooking together. Pip, Ember, and Whisper, now grown but still his dear friends, assisted him. As Jake watched his students work together, sharing techniques and ideas, he remembered that first night. 3 small, scared creatures huddled by his trash bins. He had simply fed them because they were hungry. It was such a small act of kindness. But sometimes, the smallest acts create the biggest changes. And sometimes, sharing a meal is the first step toward changing the galaxy.